way that we want to open each of these shows, we're going to talk through three questions of what the Bears roster currently looks like, what we think the Bears are going to be spending on the position this offseason, draft capital wise, and the traits that we're looking for to fit the Bears scheme. But first off, within that, let's talk about what the Bears currently have. Ron, what do you see on the roster that you say, there might be a need, there might not? What's there currently, and what do you expect from it?
I think in terms of the defensive tackle position, Q, right now for the Bears, there's a lot of promise there, right? You and I talked very, very highly of the guys that were in that room throughout the course of the season, right? Javon Dexter Sr., Zach Pickens, just to mention two of those names. And even veterans like Justin Jones had a nice season. Now, I think what we see when we look at that D tackle room is a lot of youth that can still grow. And the maybe the addition for one legitimate quote unquote dude in that room, right? Just a game wrecker from the inside, somebody that you can complement with a guy like Montez Sweat on the outside on this defensive line. I think we saw the flashes from a guy like Javon Dexter, especially late in the season, playing alongside a guy like Montez Sweat. But there's still a lot of growth, I think, to be had with guys like Pickens and Dexter. One more just game wrecker, in my opinion, is what the Bears could use in that defensive tackle room. What do you think, you?
Yeah, so I mean, I look at it and you say, and I'm the biggest fanboy of Javon Dexter out there, right? Like that was my dude last year in the draft, and I was just pumped up when they took him. But even with development, I'm not. You look at him, and you say he's still a developing player. He's not a sure thing on that defensive line. I see it right now. It's really Billings is the only sure thing that they really have rostered at the defensive tackle spot. And you might sit there and say Montez Sweat's pretty good too, but Montez Sweat is an edge rusher, and we're talking defensive tackle. So, I'm hoping we keep seeing progression from Dexter. I think you can expect him to be close to a starting role, if not a starting role this year. But you want to, in my opinion, you want to keep stacking talent there because you never have enough D tackle talent. Guys go down. It's a brutal position. I'm not sure what you're expecting from Zach Pickens this year. You hope, again, he finished the year showing some development and some upside that you kind of liked, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much you can sit here and count on him either to be much more than just a rotational player. So adding someone who, to me, and I'll even throw Demarcus Robinson in the conversation because he's a third down interior rusher, right? And I think that does change what you're looking for at the position too, because how many 280, 270 pound defensive tackles can you truly roster? I mean, I'm not sure that you can really stack those kind of guys that much. You have room for one of them, maybe. To me, it's probably as simple as you look at what they lost, Justin Jones, you got to replace Justin Jones. And you might be able to replace better than that, but you got to replace that type of player who's 300 pounds, can kind of, I'll save that conversation for the scheme stuff, actually, the final question.
Well, I like it, just a really quick cue to add what you said. I think people need to keep in mind, especially with the defensive line position, right? Because there's another episode of Building the Board coming up this evening with edge rushers highlighted. So the whole D line is going to get covered here this evening if you're tuning along.
And if you're listening on podcast, that will be released on Thursday.
Boom. There you go. Good plug. Good plug. Defensive line, more than any position in football, rotates and rotates heavily. Most good teams are about 7 or 8 guys deep at the D-line position. I know even at the college level, really good teams are as deep as 9 and 10 deep of guys that they'll rotate on the field. Because it's such a high motor position, you always want to be able to be deeper than your opponent is at that spot. Q, you said it perfectly, right? Just continue to stack at a position like defensive tackle.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to the, what's the expected draft capital expenditure for the Bears at this spot? And this is a tough question. I look at Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham. They came from the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Chiefs, I mean, a lot of their investment has been more at edge, but they like some of those heavier edges, right? Like, I mean, the last 2 years they've drafted 2 edges in the top 2 rounds between Karlaftis and Anaduke Uzoma. So you see the Chiefs there. So that's where Ryan Poles comes from, investing in the defensive trenches. You see the Eagles, where Ian Cunningham comes from. The Eagles take a defensive tackle every dang year on day one or day two, every year.
100%.
So to me, it's tough to sit here and say I don't expect the Bears to invest a decent amount of draft capital into the defensive trenches. Now, whether that's D tackle or edge, I'm not sure, but that's my read on it. At the very least, I expect probably 2 day 3 picks if they don't take a guy in day one or day two.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Q. I think, especially with just even Ryan Pohl's rap sheet as general manager so far, he's not afraid to invest in the defensive side of the ball, period, especially on day 2 of the draft. I really wouldn't be shocked to see the Bears execute a trade, execute in an acquisition of a guy here. Obviously, they are a little bit limited in terms of what they have. No 6th round pick, no 7th round pick, but you got 2 4s, you got that 3, you've obviously got the 2 1s. I could see that 3rd round pick very easily being a defensive lineman. I agree with you. I'm not sure if it's on the edge or if it's at the defensive tackle spot. I think we'll get our answer to that when free agency comes and goes, because there's a very notable 3 technique that's going to be on the market most likely, and the Bears can probably pay him. And he hails from Kansas City, ironically. But as of now, I'm right there with you, Q. I would not be surprised at all to watch this front office draft a defensive lineman on either day 1 of the draft, especially if they move around quite a bit, or even day 2 of the draft with that 3rd round pick.
Yeah, and so that brings us to the traits that we're looking for, and this is a big deal for us because we're building the Bears draft board. We're not building ESPN's draft board or the Athletics draft board. We're building one specifically for the Bears. So how these guys will fit in Matt Eberflus's system is something that really matters to what we're looking at. But Ron, are there any specific traits that you look for?
Q, from a traits perspective, I think the one thing that, especially in a 4-3, we see it time and time again. If you have a guy that just can be a disruptor, right? Like, he doesn't need to be the perfect player. He doesn't need to do 4 or 5 things really well. Usually the guys that are high motor and are just brutes in terms of strength usually do pretty well in a 4-3 at either one of the defensive tackle spots. Now, granted, at a 3 technique spot, we're probably looking for more of a disruptor than we would be, say, a 1 technique spot where that guy's expected to be a little more of a run stopper, i.e. Andrew Billings, and contribute in the kind of that gap scheme game of the defense. But I want a guy with a high motor that's just going to piss off the opposing offensive line. That's at the end of the day what I really want, and kind of a trait that I'm looking for, right? Be that bully on the defensive line, especially at the defensive tackle position, because if you can, in the 4-3, it works from the inside out, and that includes the defensive tackles as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the disruption is a major thing here. I also think, you look at Matt Eberflus's history at defensive tackle, he wants length. He cares about length. That's something that he values, and that's something that we're going to value because of that. And
100%.
then also a little bit, like I said earlier, about you already got DeMarcus Walker kind of filling that pass down 3 tech pass rusher role for you.
Yeah, kind of that
And
rush 3.
it kind of limits what I think the Bears will actually look at, because there's a lot of guys like that in this class, a lot of them. And I'm not sure that you can sit there and say we only have 300-pounders on our defensive line and we expect to eat. I mean, that's one guy goes down, you only got 2 guys who can play any given down. And that's just not really a position you want to be in. So what I'm looking at is that Justin Jones type player, like physical profile, Javon Dexter type physical profile, guys who can play every down, guys who can, you're not afraid if you have to motion them, shift them over to the nose tackle alignment, because offenses will motion to get your alignments off of what you want them to be. Like, they will force you to put Billings in the 3 tech and whoever the other guy is in the 1 tech at times. And you can't be scared of that guy going in the 1 tech, and it's just not going to work. So I need guys who are 300 pounds and can handle some power. That's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, well said. I think a perfect player comp that you can even just point to and say this is what Eberflus wants. And guys, look at DeForest Buckner. Long, big, powerful. I mean, he's the prototype, in my opinion, of what Eberflus would like in a defensive tackle if he had it his way at the end of the day.
There is one guy. He wasn't on the list that I sent you because I hadn't watched him yet, but I watched him over the weekend. There's one guy who I think is
That
that
guy.
Eberflus might fall in love with. He's a
Oh boy.
super developmental guy. Like he reminds me a lot of Dexter, actually, but we'll get to him later.
Okay.
I'll mention him at the end of the show.